Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Questioning a better way, one gracefully disruptive conversation at a time.
Without further ado, let's jump in. Kris, welcome to Turmeric and Tequila. I am excited today. We have Kris Beech. He is a former NHL hockey here, and he's got a plethora of hockey poses behind him. And he's now established his own company. As you know, my Turmeric and Tequila Nation, that's small but growing. I'm a longtime athlete, and over the years, physical health and being an athlete was kind of my entrance to mental health. So like myself, Kris hailed from the athletic space and now has a company called AIM Mind Training. And in a nutshell, it's a student athlete community that helps users better understand who they are, what they want, and how to approach life with a mindset suited for success, happiness, and well-being. I'm going to let him fully dive in. But without further ado, Kris, welcome to Turmeric and Tequila.
Kristen, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. It took a little bit of time for us, but here we are.
Yes, and in full transparency, my guests know I love Connects of Connects, and I met Kris through Robert Grigor. If you heard one of my prior episodes, we talked about EMDR and a bunch of really forward-thinking mental health approaches. So when Robert was like, listen, you got to connect with Kris. He's an athlete. You guys are on the same page. And it was about mental health and youth and mental health. I was super pumped. So Kris, I'm excited. Before we get into the biz and some of your professional pursuits as far as sports, give me a little background on you, like where you grew up, how you got into hockey, how you were as a kid, the whole 411.
Yeah, well, as with anyone that I work with as a coach, I think our background is important as a leader for people to understand where we're coming from and why we do what we do. So, I grew up in British Columbia here, about 5 hours east of Vancouver on Trans-Canada Highway, a small town called Sicamous, British Columbia. We had a population of about 3,000 growing up, and through the 90s and early 2000s, late 80s, well known to produce high-level athletes in ice hockey. So we've had about, in that time frame, about 15 players that either went on to play some form of pro hockey or a high-level elite junior hockey in Canada. So for that size of town, per capita, we pumped out some great players, and that's where I developed a love of athletics. I played many different sports, primarily organized sports were baseball and hockey in the winter, baseball in the summer, but hockey was most definitely the biggest love for me, and that's where it all started in Sicamous there. Some other notable players that I grew up with, Shea Weber of the Montreal Canadiens, Cody Franson, who played about 8 years in the NHL for a variety of different teams. So we have a rich history there. As a young athlete, I was, you could say, a bit of a prodigy, and I'm not saying that out of ego, just that is what it was. And from a very early age, I was being compared to a lot of players growing up. Some really significant players in the NHL, and as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, there was definitely a lot of hype around me as a young athlete. As a 14-year-old, I was drafted into the Western Hockey League, which is a Tier 1 junior hockey league here in Canada, and I was drafted third overall, so considered the third best player in Western Canada at 14, and headed to one of the premier junior leagues in Canada. And for many young hockey players here in Canada, it's a dream to play in the Western Hockey League, which it was a dream for me as well. So big expectations, a lot of hype, a lot of hype coming from myself as a young athlete, a lot of expectation, but also my parents were new to everything. They were a along the ride with me, and by no fault of theirs, it was something that they were fully engaged with as well. The hype and everything that goes with an athlete that excels at a young age. From there, went on to play with the Calgary Hitmen of the Western Hockey League for 4 years. We had phenomenal teams, successful teams. For a few of those years, we were ranked number 1 in the country. As an 18-year-old, I was drafted to the NHL, 7th overall. So that again, one of the top players considered at my age in the world at that time.
What year was this, just for frame of reference?
That was a long time ago. It was 1999.
Okay, well, that's when I graduated high school.
Yeah, that's when I graduated too. So it was
not that long ago.
Long time ago, but I still, of course, it's still something that I'm proud of to be at that level, at that age. So, and junior hockey was primarily a good experience, but I moved away from home about 5 hours away from home as a 16-year-old and lived with a billet family, which, it provided its own hurdles. So as a young kid, managing a variety of different things in that environment, that definitely played into it, combined with, performance pressure, expectation. And throughout that time was my first experience with brain health and an issue with brain health, and from a personal life trauma, which I won't get into too much detail about, but that led to a post-traumatic stress eating disorder. So at 17, I started to really have a difficult time eating enough as an athlete. I'm sure you understand the calorie intake. I had a hard time holding food down. If I ate too quickly or I ate too much, it would trigger this stress response, and quite often would end up losing my meal. So that was going on throughout my junior career, and that would last about 5 years, where I would have 2-3 times a week where I would have a hard time eating. And as a high performance athlete, that also provided some challenges. But all in all, managing all those different experiences through junior, it was a successful time, and I enjoyed it, and I ended up again being successful, moving into pro, into the pro game. Again, being compared to many different high level NHL players, some of them Hall of Famers, and continuing to build to those expectations and a bit of that ego as an athlete. Went into Washington, and there's chatter around the team as I was a guy that was going to be a potential franchise player for that organization. Wow. So a lot to shoulder for a young mind, that really there wasn't many people in my circle that had some experience with it. So again, being grounded was something that just wasn't there. And again, no fault to my parents and those around me. They were experiencing it for themselves newly as well. So so finished my junior career as property of the Washington Capitals. And then my first year pro as a 20-year-old, right before the season, in the off season, I was involved in a major trade to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and it involved myself and a couple other prospects, young prospects that I was drafted with. But the player in return is a Hall of Famer, Jaromir Jagr. He's one of the best players to play the game. I think he's second or third all time in scoring in the NHL, and at the time was the best player in the league. So, and all the newspapers and everything around the trade. Again, I was considered a big part of that trade, and Pittsburgh tagged me as another potential franchise player. So again, feeding that expectation and that ego a little bit more. As a 19-year-old, I signed my first pro contract, so they threw $1 million at me as well. So you can imagine all those factors in a a young developing mind, and it was pretty interesting. So went into Pittsburgh. My childhood idol Mario Lemieux was playing there. He had come back from retirement the year before, so that was a surreal experience to play with him. Played my first year as a 20-year-old in the NHL with Penguins, and that's a tough thing to do in that league as a young player. Had a decently successful year as a 20-year-old, and then went into my second year. Obviously, as any athlete, hoping to improve on the first year, and went into that training camp. There's a new coach, and played decently well in that training camp. But the team had a different plan for me that year, and they ended up sending me down to the minor leagues, which on my radar did not exist. There was no thought of ever spending any time in the minor leagues, and that combined with those expectations that I had built. In fact, I was already in my mind that franchise player without building up to it and putting in the work, which I had a lot to do. So getting sent down to the minors was a complete and utter shock, and it would be something that would affect how I viewed the success of my entire career. So it was a significant point in my mindset and how I approached each experience. I would end up, throughout the rest of my career, chasing that bar I had set, and had a hard time viewing anything other than that bar as successful. So spent 4 years with Pittsburgh's organization. I was up and down with the minor league team and the pro team, or the NHL team, the Penguins, for the next few years, but didn't get an opportunity to reclaim that spot on that team. And went into my fifth year with the Penguins. By that time, they had drafted Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. So I clearly knew I wasn't the young gun in town anymore. And, that obviously didn't deter me from wanting to contribute to that team and playing alongside players like that. So I went into that training camp, and 2 days before camp, I got a call from the GM, and he informed me that I was going to be traded to the Nashville Predators. And now, for 4 years, I had built, many great friendships. My girlfriend was from Pittsburgh, and all of a sudden, in a day, I was off to a whole new experience. And so it was definitely a change that I had to manage, and a whole new set of players, a whole new set of prospects, figuring out where I would fit in Nashville. Went in to that camp, which was quite a neat camp. I mentioned our small town of 3,000. There was 3 of us at that Nashville camp from Sycamore. So 3 players that were at an NHL camp from a really small town. So that was quite a neat experience there. Did well in that camp, but ended up getting sent down to the minors again, and the GM had some choice words for me, and he basically said, you have all the tools and you have the size, and he said, but there's something missing. And that stuck with me for a long time, and it was hard for me to figure out what was missing. So I went down to the minors in Milwaukee, and had one of the best years at that level to date. Got called up to Nashville a number of times, or one time, sorry. But ultimately played the majority of the year in the minors. 3/4 of the way through that year, I got traded again. So another change, another trade, and I got traded back to the team that drafted me, the Washington Capitals. So talked to the GM, and he informed me that I would come in there and play with with the big club for the rest of the year, which was about 20 games. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be in the NHL, and I was looking forward to that opportunity. Alex Ovechkin, another star, was in his first year. His rookie season, he scored 50 goals, which is quite amazing. So I got to see his act a little bit, which was neat to see. It was quite the environment. There's a lot of Russian dance music and disco balls in the dressing room, which was quite interesting. But
Yes.
yeah, so, but again, that experience didn't turn out how I expected it. I expected to go there for 20 games. A few games in, I got called into the coach's office, and he informed me that I'd be sent down to the minors again. So down to Hershey, Pennsylvania, chocolate town. Was there for a couple of games, got called back up to the Capitals, played another 2 games there, and then back down to Hershey, where the team told me I would be there the rest of the year and help that team go on a playoff run. And once I got down to Hershey and got to know my teammates, it was a tight-knit family group, great coach in Kris Beech. And I had an amazing time in Hershey, and we ended up winning the minor league championship that year, which is no easy trophy to win. So it was turned out to be one of my greatest accomplishments in hockey, and I quite often say it came from getting not what I expected in Washington there. So a great accomplishment. From there, I played well. I was one of the top players in the playoffs. I had a lot of confidence heading into that off season. Re-signed with the Capitals and went in and made that Capitals team and played a full year with the Washington Capitals. In this being my 6th year pro. So battled back and found my way back to the NHL. Had a decent year that year. Did what I could with the playing time that I got, and headed into the next off season. Washington had informed me a little insight into the business here. Was talking to them, and they said, we are considering qualifying you, which means we give you, they have to, through the collective bargaining agreement, if they want to retain your rights at a certain age, they have to give you a qualifying offer, which at that time was an offer that was a 10% pay rise. But they told me they were deciding between me and another player. And literally 2 minutes before that deadline of their decision, they called me and said they were going to go with the other player. So off to free agency I went again, and started talking to some teams, narrowed it down to the Columbus Blue Jackets. The coach had some good things to say about my opportunity there, so I was excited to head in there and to earn a job. Played well in camp, got down to the last cuts of that team, and ended up heading back down to the minors of that club. And at this point in my career, there was a significant wall that I hit in terms of my resilience capacity. Yeah. And their minor league team was in Syracuse. And I look back on that time quite often, and especially when I tell this story, and really I wonder how I made it through that time and stuck with playing. It was a significant challenge away from the ice. It was hard for me to enjoy being at the rink. I was struggling away from the rink, and it was the first time that I had been diagnosed with major depressive disorder. So a challenging time, and somehow I found a way to play well enough to get called back up to the NHL. But at that time, I was a professional. I knew what it took to contribute, even though I wasn't feeling great. So I was able to contribute, get the call back up to the big club, and ended up being there for 2 months and played some of the best hockey of my NHL career in Columbus for those 2 months. 2 months came around, and again, another insight into the business of hockey. At that time, my contract was a two-way contract. One salary for the NHL, a lower salary for the minor league system. And the team, after 2 months, had to decide and tell me if I was going to be there for the rest of the year. And if I was, they had to tell me to get find a place to stay, because at the time I was living in a hotel. So there was a little loophole in that decision-making process where they could place me on waivers, which meant it would give other teams an opportunity to pick up my contract. And if I cleared waivers then and stayed with the organization, they could keep me in the NHL, and it'd give them another two months to make that decision. So they put me on waivers in the middle of the week, and they fully intended on keeping me. There was a game on Saturday, and they said, if you clear waivers, you'll be playing on Saturday. So onto waivers I went. Didn't hear much for a few days, and then I get a call after a few days, and my agent informed me that I got picked up by another team, and that team was the Vancouver Canucks, which was essentially my hometown. So I was bummed about leaving Columbus, because it was a great team, a lot of good teammates. I kind of found a role and a spot on that team, and it was playing well. So it was hard to leave. But now heading into Vancouver, another opportunity to play on a good team and play in front of my family and friends. So I was pumped to go there. Off to Vancouver I went, and wasn't there long. I was there for about 5 games, and got called into the coach's office, and the coach informed me that he didn't think I was fast enough for his team or for the league, and that he thought I should go down to the minors to work on my speed. So back on to waivers I went, and of course it was a bit of a confusing message, because the coach in Columbus essentially said I had proved that I was a regular NHL contributor. So again, really challenging to manage those mixed messages. Back on waivers, opening up to other teams, and was unsure about the future without a doubt. I got a call again, and I got picked up. So I got picked up by the Washington Capitals. So the team I was on the year before, I got a call from the GM, and he said, you know what, we should have qualified you. We're glad to have you back. And called on my buddies in Washington to let them know I was coming back. So it was exciting to head back there. Went to the airport, and on my way down, got to the U.S. Customs agent, and asked me the regular questions. What are you going to do down there? I said, I'm going to go play hockey in Washington. And he started sifting through my passport, and he said, well, where's your P1 work visa? And I said, I don't know. And then he informed me, well, I think the Canadian agent must have stripped it out of your passport as you came up to Canada. So I'm not going to be able to let you get across the border without that visa. So on the phone with the GM and let him know what was going on, and they started looking into it. And I went to the hotel at the airport. Was training in the gym there, trying to stay in shape, waiting to hear. Didn't hear anything for a few days, and then I got a call from the GM. Thought it was going to be a visa, but it turned out that they put me on waivers again. So back on waivers, that would be the 3rd time in a matter of a few weeks. So again, by this time I had to cope in some way. So it became a bit of a joke with my brother and I, and used a little humor to try to manage the chaos a little bit. A few days went by, and lo and behold, I got picked up again by another team. That team being the Pittsburgh Penguins, so the team where it all started. So back to the Penguins, and at this time in 2008, they were a powerhouse. Sidney Crosby, Malkin, Marian Hossa ended up there. Marc-Andre Fleury ended up there. So an opportunity to go there and contribute potentially to an NHL playoff team. So exciting times. 5 games into that opportunity, after spending 10 days at the border waiting for my visa, and not being on the ice, I got to Pittsburgh and got into 5 games with the Penguins that year. 5th game in, went into a battle with a big veteran defenseman, and I tried to hit him before he hit me, and it didn't exactly go my way. And I went flying into the boards and landed on my wrist, broke my wrist 5 games into that opportunity. And at that level, it's dog eat dog. So you're out with an injury. There's someone else right on your heels, ready to take that opportunity. So, they kept me around, obviously, to recover. And right before playoffs, they could have sent me down to the minors, but they kept me as an extra player for their run. So I got to be around that team and be a part of that team. In 2008, they went all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals against the Red Wings. So I got to see what those guys did night in, night out, the focus and the attention to detail required to perform at that high level. They didn't end up winning, but it was a phenomenal experience, and I was that close to being part of a Stanley Cup push, which is every kid's dream. So that was my first 7 years of my career, and there's 8 more years of European experience that I could talk about, but I won't go that far. Point being, it was a mix of success and a mix of adversities, all the while managing mental health along the way. That would be a significant battle for me continuing on into Europe. A couple years into Sweden, I finally received a correct diagnosis from a psychiatrist there of bipolar disorder. So I was first diagnosed with major depressive disorder, which was not the correct diagnosis. And it's in that year where I discovered the practice of mindfulness. And it came through my own exploration. At the time, there was a number of books coming out about neuroplasticity. There's a lot of research coming out saying that the brain is malleable and plastic. That research led me to figuring out how to make those changes in the brain and how to change some of the thinking patterns, emotional patterns, and behavioral patterns that I had unknowingly encouraged over the years, and how to make some changes there, because my performance was suffering. My enjoyment for the game was virtually nil, and again, it was a really challenging time. But at the same time, as a professional, I knew how to contribute to the team no matter how I felt. So I was able to do that in one of the best leagues in the world. But definitely a significant challenge. It was hard on not only myself, but my girlfriend, who was my wife at the time, or wife now. Significantly challenging for her to manage that. I didn't really accept the diagnosis, and I went on some medication to help with it. And there was something about that stigma of being on medication that I didn't like. So I would go on it for a while, and I'd feel better, and then I would do my best to try and go off. And it was definitely created an up and down situation with my mental health. Mindfulness, though, played a significant role and had a huge impact in my performance. I was able to really find my game again and find the love of the game again, based on my commitment and time into that practice and training the mind in that way. And it also, of course, helped with well-being away from the arena and within my relationships. So significant impact on the choices I was able to make that were healthy and influenced myself and others in a good way. So yeah.
Well,
So over yeah.
Oh,
So over.
I don't want. I just want to interrupt there, just really quick, because I really want to get into that mindfulness piece and break down the timeline, because any athlete knows it's so hard to take a love, something you do for fun and you love it. In hockey, you guys are professional so young and competitive so young, even if you're not in the NHL. That pressure, and when you take something you love, you do for fun, and then it becomes a job and you're a commodity. So that in itself, very baseline, that mental transition, I think, is really hard. I struggled with that I was 18, 19 in college, freshman year, and kind of even just being on scholarship. I couldn't imagine if it was, millions of dollars or $1 million, which is insane. As, 16, 17, 18, 19, that in itself is hard. Then you pack in the trading and not having a home base, and the struggle, I'm assuming the love with the game, with the business side, which you kind of have to learn on the fly. I got to ask you, and I want to get to the business and then really unpack this mental health training. Because I think when we were growing up, or at least in my household, which I graduated in 99, I competed at high level. It was women's lacrosse, so we can only get so high. But, and then even at CrossFit, we were at the games and everything. Post-college, the mental training, we did a little bit around visualization and some basic stuff, but no really unpacking of anything in depth, especially if you had like a trauma, which most people at varies in degrees have had trauma in some capacity. So it's eye-opening to me that we hadn't had those conversations at that point. But then on the flip side, I look back and I'm like, well, of course we didn't, because it really wasn't, no celebrities were talking about it, nowhere. I mean, even at the highest levels that you're exposed to every avenue to build that competitive edge, and human optimization, it's still pretty new. And you guys, us too, we had, concussions, and even from injury, I'm surprised there wasn't further conversation. So there's a couple questions around the background we discovered, and we'll dive into the biz. First thing I got to ask, what did you do with $1 million at 17, 18, 19 years old? I got to ask.
Yeah, well, I bought a car for sure.
Of course.
Yeah, bought a nice car, and looking back, I think it was nice at the time, but I think again, speaking about being grounded, there was a lot of work to be done before I deserved to be driving that type of car around. So yeah, and then other than that, another component of it again was some shadow side behavior involved in that experience as well. So partying was definitely part of that experience. Started out as just fun, like any young kid, bonding with the team, but it eventually grew into a way of coping with stress and some of the ups and downs of the career. So that was definitely part of the experience as well, and
Sure.
played a significant role in the ups and downs. But yeah, with the money, you mentioned, you nailed it. There's a variety of different motivating factors in that elite level of sport, and money being one of them, one of those external motivators. Status, comparisons to others, recognition, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but definitely those external motivators are something to be aware of. And if we put, which was in my case, if the balance is tipped in those external motivations, it's going to be challenging in terms of the enjoyment of the sport. What I've noticed with the best players that I played with, the best athletes in the world, they didn't really focus so much on the money. It was almost like they were interacting with the game like they did when they were 8, 9 years old, and that wasn't their primary motivation. Their primary motivation was improvement, constant improvement, seeing what they were capable of. Of course, driving towards winning that was their primary motivation, the internal motivation, the satisfaction of self-improvement and seeing what you're capable of. So with the best players in the world, that is something that I can reflect on and say, yes, these guys were with and engaging in the game in that way. And so definitely the business side of things, the external side of things, if there's a lot of focus on those, it will definitely make it more challenging. So,
sure. Did the NHL? I wanted to cut you up, but did the NHL provide any? As a young human, a lot of you guys going in there are super young. I mean, we're talking, I don't know, under 21. Did they give you any coaching as far as like, here's what's going to come with, money, finances, mental health, groupies, like there's a lot of education. I think the NBA actually does.
The NBA is really quite progressive in some of I don't know so many of the details, but I've seen some articles and they are progressive in that type of education. But no, we didn't. We received a little bit. My agent, they did their best to manage that side of things. Again, my parents were really new to the whole situation. So, and we had access through the NHLPA to some of the best psychologists in North America. Mm-hmm. And I took advantage of that for the most part. But, and again, I understood that side of the game was important. But what I found with sports psychology is that, it had its, for me, it had its limits. It was a lot of talk, and there wasn't a really tangible way of engaging with sports psychology and training some of the things that we were talking about, at least at that time.
Sure.
And that's why mindfulness really hit home with me, because it was as tangible as you could get with that type of training. It was something that I knew I could sit down and practice, because I felt when I practiced it, there was a state of being that I noticed almost immediately. I also noticed that I experienced moments of silence in between my constant negative ruminations. And I said, and knowing what I had learned through neuroplasticity, I said, well, that is something that I need to repeat, finding those moments of silence within that practice. So, and as an athlete, I knew how to commit to training, and that's what really resonated with me about training focus and attention in that particular way through mindfulness. So obviously I learned a lot from sports psychologists, gained a lot of experience there, and that combined with that support combined with mindfulness was really where I was able to turn the corner on some of the thinking, emotional and behavioral patterns that were quite ingrained in my way of being.
Sure. Well, yeah. So, and I mean, just not this, again, we're talking about this is the surface level stuff, but even just not having a home, I don't have statistics, but I know even just somebody that's moved, if you're an athlete or a music star or something that's on the road, someone doesn't have a home base in itself, I think is super, super challenging. And this, again, is the professional and athletic side. And then you mentioned, relationship, personal, family, to manage all that is a whole other stressor. And again, you're a 0-year-old, so you don't have, any of these skill sets. So it's pretty remarkable that you could navigate these waters, for 6 years. I think you said the NHL, and then you did the European League for another 7. That's insane to me. At what point did you really start to say, okay, the talk therapy, which I think around like 90s to like late 90s, mid 2000s, I think the real human optimization outside of like military, where, these guys are paid to stay alive and keep themselves together, which the VA is a whole other conversation. But where people were really starting to get on the trend setting tip of mental health, brain health, concussions, trauma, neuroplasticity. I've been fortunate enough to do brain mapping and some of this neurological stuff just because I was an athlete in some companies I've worked with. But tell me when you really started to say, okay, talk therapy I've got what I think I can get from it. When were you introduced to the next best thing? And tell me about what you call mindfulness is for you and how you do it on the daily.
Yeah, well, I think it was definitely in Sweden there. It's just I wasn't able to improve the way I was interacting with the experience. So it was to a point where I had to choose do I continue playing or do I stop, and that's really what spurred me on to find a way to continue, and spurred on the exploration that went beyond simply talking to somebody, and that exploration of neuroplasticity. So that was really that was the point. And
what year was this?
This was 2011.
Okay.
2011. Yeah. 2010, 2011. And after that, it's been a daily practice since. And
wow.
I started out building up slowly for the first month or two, and then I noticed again that state change in and around a formal practice of mindfulness, where you sit down and you practice focusing on a specific focal point. For me, I had been reading a lot of Zen tradition at that time, so Vipassana insight practice centered around breath awareness was what I really focused on, and for me it was sensations in my nostrils as I was breathing in and out. That
so is this meditation focus. Essentially?
It is
it's different.
A mindful meditation, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, so and again, one pointed focus on the breath is what I started out with, and from there I would practice that every single day for almost 2 years. So I worked a lot with the movement and sensations of the breath, which with athletics, especially in a cold building like the arena, the distinct temperature change in the nose is very easy to focus on. So I would sit every day formally. I'd find a space, quiet, do the whole close my eyes, sometimes eyes open, for a specific amount of time, and that's called a formal practice. And I describe that nowadays as setting up a squat rack for the mind. So getting in that squat rack for the mind and repping out that focus and that attention, and working on awareness of the mind wandering to thinking, and that's the process that we're training is that awareness when the mind is moving away from our focal point, and that opens up our choice on where our attention is and what we give energy to in terms of our thinking, and being able to choose to return back to a focal point, which was my breath. So that formal squat rack practice, if we think of that in terms of athletics, we do, I don't know how many things to get bigger, stronger, faster, more explosive. We work on balance, mobility, leg strength, conditioning, all these different things, hours upon hours of work to get bigger, stronger, faster, more agile, and obviously trains the mind in its own way. But sitting down and working with the mind in a different way through mindful meditation, also with repetition, we can see physical changes in the brain in relation to attention regulation, emotional regulation, decision making. So I repped that out every day, and then I would take what I worked on in that formal practice and I would apply it to my activity. So, and this is a very deliberate choice within activity to pay attention to the breath. And for me, I understood that right away, that it wasn't going to feel natural. I understood that it was going to be challenging, and it wasn't going to be natural. Just like any other skill that we learn, or any physical conditioning or strengthening that we go through. I don't know about you, but there was days in the gym where I absolutely was, in pain, and it was not comfortable. And I'm not saying mindfulness gives you pain, but it's definitely challenging and not always comfortable. So applying it to activity will feel challenging in the beginning. And I worked on for the last 5 years of my career, which I fully, the support I had around me, plus mindfulness, I put a significant, onus on mindfulness as extending my career 5 years for sure. And I worked on integrating those practices into every element of the competitive environment, in and around the dressing room, in practice, in games, finding opportunities to ensure that I was present and engaged with the moment. And that was a phenomenal practice, because it led to freeing up my skill, ability, know-how that I knew was in there, that I knew was there, but was being handcuffed by some of these negative thinking patterns over the past number of years that I had built up. And it was a way of experiencing that moment with what we call a beginner's mind, which for me, it essentially was a way of learning how to be with the game like I was when I was a kid. Relearning how to be with the game like I was when I was a kid. And that was really what it was all about. And at the time, I didn't think of it that way, but reflecting back on it, that's what it was really all about.
And that's what you said. You saw when the best players that you remember playing alongside, it sounds like they maintain that mentality, and that's likely what led to their greatest success. You obviously need the full recipe of, training, mentality, natural ability. Was there, you said you were reading books, but was there any one person or practice that was guiding your evolution in this mindfulness practice, or were you just kind of pulling from different books and tools to kind of build your own practice?
I mean, I definitely followed the Zen tradition initially, reading books from Thich Nhat Hanh and Suzuki, a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, is a small little book that I refer to this day. And I actually don't shift away from that book too often. Another book that was instrumental in my research was The Practical Neuroscience of Love and Happiness by Rick Hansen. So he's a significant researcher in the area, and he wrote a phenomenal book, and I think it was released in 2009. And that really shed some light on a little bit of the history of human development and some of the natural biases towards negative thinking that we have. I learned about our sympathetic response and how it is triggered by daily stressors, and how that response, due to our evolutionary past, is one of survival, and quite often it'll feel like our life is threatened, which was a significant eye-opener for me, both learning about the negativity bias of our thinking, and everyone just to varying degrees, of course, and then that element of the nervous system, you know, plus the science behind meditation. That book was instrumental to me. He's got a newer book called Hardwiring Happiness, which again is in relation to his research. But that little Zen book is you can read one paragraph and spend a lot of time thinking about it and implementing it and how it relates to many different things in life. So it's definitely a read where you'll read it first and then you'll be like, wait a second, let me go back and check that out. So those books were.
Did somebody give that to you? So when you were in Sweden, was it a coach or just a human in your environment? Like, how did that happen? I'm always curious at the start of all these.
Yeah, no, it was actually a family friend who was a priest of the Swedish church, and he actually married my wife and I later on, and he was a friend of my wife's family, and he was an interesting guy. And the Swedish church is they are, in terms of churches, where churches are, they are very, very open-minded, a very open-minded church. So he spent a lot of time linking Zen practice with the messages of Christianity. So he would find those linkages. And I'm not a really spiritual person. I've never really gone to church. That's not something that I really focus on.
Well, you could be spiritual without being religious. Because I actually think the mindfulness, because I'm with you. I'm actually very Swedish. So I'm going to check out this church. And it recently started to unpack some of these ideas around religion, which in full transparency has been a little bit hard. I would consider myself deeply spiritual, but not really religious. But I think the breathing and connecting with self is spiritual. And keep in mind, it's all subjective, so you can kind of label it how you like. But just my 2 cents on spirituality.
Yeah, definitely. I agree there 100%. And for me, I've kind of developed this, again, through mindfulness, an attitude towards those types of labels. For me, being as present as often as I can is enough. And being present with myself and being present with people that I'm speaking with. And of course, it's a challenge, and there's still lots of learning going on, and lots of times where I still lose control, and I'm still learning as I go here. But he definitely, he gave me that little Zen book. The other books I found on my own. My mother actually sent me a book. What is it? How to Change Your Brain, and it was a book on the latest neuroplasticity research.
Okay.
And
yes,
that
Mom.
one, yeah, thank you, Mom. She's I get my curiosity from her. She's my father's a physician, and she's been in they've been in rural health here in BC for 40 years, and she's a curious soul and curious mind. So she's always been there with suggestions. So yeah, that's, again, the support I had there was great. And
isn't it funny? I just got to say, you have your a plethora of resources from these billion-dollar organizations with recovery and fascial stretching and training, whatever, and then some of your best shifting resources are coming from like the church, from Mom, from stuff that's not even in those like high-end conversations or high-end professional situations. It's always crazy to me. You kind of have to seek, and this is a good message to anyone in any environment you're in. The answer might not be right in front of you, but it's probably around you, just not in the space you're looking, as cliche as that sounds.
No, for sure. And that's a big part of A-Mind training, and big part of the education that I'm doing my best to get across to organizations, leadership, kids, that
Yeah,
these are,
so tell
yeah,
us, I'm interrupting you all here, but I think there's a little bit of a
that's
delay.
fine.
But tell me about AIM. So AIM, tell me when you started it, and then, because I think this will be perfect crossover, because I'm so excited that young humans, had, our 14-year-old selves had these conversations. I think it would have been a game changer. I do think we went through process for a reason. And it's, why I started this podcast, to start exposing the truth that, it took me forever to find some of them, and we're still learning. How did AIM, when did you start it, and how did AIM kick off? And tell us a little bit about it, and then I'll have 100 questions from there.
Yeah, well, it started through obviously the impact mindfulness had, and after a couple of years there, I found myself teaching curious friends a little bit about meditation, mindfulness, and I said, you know what, if I'm going to be talking to people about this, I should probably figure out a way to be educated on sharing it appropriately. So I got certified in 2015 through a program in Arizona, Sarah McLean Meditation Institute, and now it took me about 1.5 years to find a certification. At that time, there wasn't many around, and hers was kind of linked up with my the areas that I studied and practiced in. And she's predominantly her audience is predominantly middle-aged women and women. So I was doing this certification with that group, which it was completely fine. But
they see this young hockey guy walk in, they're probably like, "This is awesome."
yeah, and I pop out my teeth, and yeah. But it was a phenomenal experience. I did a year of work, and then an intensive at the end. And Sarah, a phenomenal job with that program. And to this day, I also went through the mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher intensive, which is a great program as well. But I continually revert back to many of the aspects of Sarah's program. She did a phenomenal job of simplifying language and making it relatable in terms of communicating the philosophy and how to establish a consistent practice. The way she did it is phenomenal, and it breaks it down in a simple way that people can relate to. A great program. So I got certified, and at the end of my career, I went to Belfast, Ireland to play, and I studied a master's in sports management. So I just had this idea to create a company where I teach mindfulness to people, and wanted to focus on athletes, of course, and combine my real life experience with my mindfulness experience and certification, and then add on the master's in sports management. Led to me starting a business after I retired in 2016. So I've been coaching and teaching in that capacity for the last 4 years. And I wrote a business plan for my master's thesis that included not only myself as a coach, but multiple coaches on a platform. And it took a few twists and turns along the way, but we are there, and we've developed not only a good group of people and mentors, counselors, coaches, but we're looking at providing a service that can actually show these skills, these intangible skills, and show that there is a relationship to, we know there's a relationship to well-being, but we have a way of showing that there's a relationship to performance, and we want to be able to say, hey, these are equally as important to individual or group performance as working on your physical skills. And in order to do that, we definitely need to show some research and data, because with the intangible elements of the experience, they're intangible. They're hard to see. If you take, and that's the thing, if you take Sidney Crosby and you look at him, you can see his tangible skill set. You see it. But with that guy, his intangibles are off the charts. But for many people that aren't around it, and I wasn't, I didn't play a long time with him, but I was there and long enough to notice his character and what type of person he was. But for the outsiders, they can only see that tangible skill. They don't see the intangibles present in players like that. So it's really hard to communicate the importance of these character skills and traits when they're very hard to see in the top athletes, because everyone just sees all the technical skills. So in my mind, from my perspective, we need to somehow make this visible, the improvement that can be. Yeah.
Do you think that what's the average age of the kids you're working with?
Between 12 and 18. So
okay.
And then sorry, go ahead.
Well, to me, it's funny because I mean, marketing and branding, it's obviously a different arena than mental health, although, there's co-branding opportunity there. There's so many intangibles around it. Like, you see influencers out there, and this is, again, why I started the podcast, to really talk about what people are doing, how influence, and these influencers are truly influential. Yes, we can, talk about conversions and sales, but people don't really, I don't think, they see, it's hard for me to qualify and quantify how them seeing athlete on screen impacts their reality or vision of themselves. If I've got, a supermodel editing their body, how that impacts my young females, I can't show you a measurable, but do I know that's happening? Do I know it's significant? Absolutely. So that's something I face. And I like that you sought after some of these resume qualifiers. Like, I think it's always good to educate and get their certificate. And we know in America, we like to see credentials. We like to see, even if, you've been through the NHL, you've been through this plethora of experience, that you can't put a resume, asterisk to, but that is the gold part. And then, we do the resume piece that kind of helps balance both. My long-winded question, do you see that our young humans are really starting to understand this without having to see that tangible? And they're like, I know this is a piece of the game, and I know, these humans at this level that are fully optimizing every angle of things, that this is a necessary piece. Like, do you think they get it at a younger age because they've started to have these conversations?
Yeah, I think definitely. And the kids that I work with, they blow me away sometimes with their understanding and their questions, and indicates that they are becoming more self-aware, and what certain thinking leads to certain behavior and emotion, and I think as adults, quite often we think that kids of that age aren't mature enough to realize that, and there might be some that are more mature than others, but I definitely think the younger coaches coming up, the younger kids are more open to it, without a doubt. It's the older leadership of these organizations that are definitely more of a challenge, and they're open to having it around. They're open to, we got this, but to actually implement it into a development program as a regular allotment of time, and a significant allotment of time, is definitely what we're working towards. And so it's definitely getting better, and some sports are better than others. Hockey is definitely a tough nut to crack. It's pretty old school. It's pretty macho, and but it's getting there. It's coming along. And for example, I worked with the national field hockey team. Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
That was a bit of a...
This is a part of the Zoom fun here.
Yeah. Well,
it keeps us humble.
I've been using my wife's computer the last little while because mine just gave out. So I'm on my phone here. Normally I'm on a computer, but what I was saying is, I've been working with the national men's field hockey team here in Canada, and there's a program that's really quite open to it, and I've had those guys sitting in a room together multiple times practicing mindfulness, and there's been some positive feedback on implementing the skills. So definitely other sports are more progressive. I think basketball is one of the most progressive sports in the area. A lot of the top stars work on these skills and they're an integral part of their performance makeup. So I think it's coming, and again, my part of is obviously curiosity of putting numbers to this type of training is part of my own internal curiosity.
Sure.
Of course, but also I want people to see the significance of putting time into these different life skills.
Well, and I think I couldn't agree more, because I think as athletes, regardless, if you're fortunate and blessed enough athletically and just in energy in general to be a part of the NHL, are such, incredibly competitive situations where you're the elite of the elite. Even when you're in that, it's not forever, because your body wears out, your mind wears out. I think even your heart around it moves on to other things. Even though it's always, I always think if you're a true athlete, I always think your first love is your sport. And no significant other may want to hear that, but I do think it's the truth. But with that, the beauty of it is, while the sport ends, the life skills that are fostered from sport are unbelievable. And I'm biased because I am an athlete, but I always love working with my fellow athletes, because there's just something there's an understanding there. And when you go to work, or you're in sales, or you're coaching, or whatever, all those life skills translate. And what I love about what you do is you can train them to be better athletes, optimize themselves as humans, be a good person. And as our young people are really facing a lot more earlier on, and, even youth suicide is on a rise, and there's heavy conversation on that, and PTSD with our veterans. These are skill sets that athletes can take on, and then once they're done with their sport, live better themselves, and then in turn kind of share their gospel, like the way, you said your pastor from a Swedish church, or your mother. These little side conversations, can save a life of, here's what I've done, or here's what I'm doing, let alone like you have a professional organization we have formal training here. Here's how you do this. And then you get into the arena of, we go from professional athlete or being best athlete to now you're helping humanity. Like, you're really having impact as a human, and saving some of our young people's lives and really questioning in a better way. And those conversations might have happened for us at maybe 18, 20, 25, 30, what have you. Now 12-year-olds are faced with some really heavy questioning, and they see some of their peers, falling victim to suicide. When your business started, did you anticipate parents seeking you out or kids seeking you out for this additional skill set?
Well, most definitely, I think it's a combination of, for the most part, it's a combination of the kids and the parents. I think the kids that I've worked with, some of them at a young age lose love for the game too young. And
you get burned out.
Early, sports specialization from an early age. I don't think parents really fully grasp what can happen, and not most likely not to their fault. They don't probably realize the research behind it. Athlete transition, I think, is what you're touching on in terms of life skills that translate beyond the experience. And to a certain degree, I think these skills are just assumed that you'll require, and I think you do to a certain degree. But again, the message that we're trying to get across with our service is that yes, you do. Many athletes they receive these, and these skills are generated just by moving through the experience, but they can be enhanced, especially when we address and educate leadership around the kids, which will be a part of what we do ensuring that coaches, leadership, parents, and the kids are all pushing and pulling in the same direction, and understanding what the experience is about and how to maximize it. And then I did a little research into athlete transition in my master's, and it's significant, and it people think it only relates to elite amateur or professional sport as a challenge, which is not the case. It can be at a young age, in the teenage years, especially if you've specialized in sport for many years as a young athlete, and all of a sudden now you have limited options to play at a high level. Your whole identity is based around that sport and that time you put into it, which can be a great thing as well, and serves many people well, putting that time into it. But it can also lead to going through an athlete transition at a young age, which research says about a 2-year process to really figure out who you are after you're done playing, and the numbers of mental health issues bump up significantly compared to the general population. So about 1 in 4 athletes, that was several years ago, but 1 in 4 athletes will experience mental health issues in their transition out of sport. So yeah, again, working on enhancing these life skills and developing character and things that will translate into all aspects of life once we leave our sport. And most definitely these things and the approach I've taken and the mindset that I've worked on and has contributed to my transition and the life of an entrepreneur and
Sure.
a business person. They're the same skills we can use as an athlete, and they're transferable. Even in health, taking care of yourself, relationships, these mindsets and the philosophy that we can take and the approach we can take these are transferable life skills that we're working on.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And they're constantly improving. I think even when you masters and NHL and all this experience, I think the older we get, we really see it's a never-ending, evolving process, which is also kind of exciting because then, unlike sports, it never really has to end. Walk us through a little bit of how, if I was an athlete coming to you, and the reason I asked about, our kids coming to our parents, because I see so much with what I do where kids will often come and they'll read packages on paper or nutrients on paper, and then they'll be like, oh, I'm going to eat healthier. And then the family will actually start eating healthier because the kid is. So I've seen it. We're just in such a transitional space in these generations. So I love to see it. I just see our young humans exposed to so much more, for better or for worse, but I see them almost influencing their parents more than the parents coming in, even though the parents were the targeted market. But walk us through a little bit. If a young human comes to you and they're like, what is step one of being like, all right, I'm signing up for the program? Is it, do you start with a conversation, a meeting, and then you do individual scheduling, and it's 1 week, 2 week? Tell me about the program.
Yeah, definitely. For as it is right now, I'm operating still on my own, but we will be launching the multi-coach platform very soon. But yeah, as it is right now, I primarily work with one-on-one clients, and then I do a number of team or group sessions. But yeah, you come to me and we have an initial discussion, and I talk to the parents, talk to the kids, ensure that they understand what they're getting into and what the process will be. We discuss frequency and duration of the program, which I recommend at least a 2 to 3 month commitment of eight sessions. And I find that, and that's, you have to give it a shot, and some people will realize benefit early on. Others will will take several months to have a realization on how it's affecting them. So we, I encourage giving it a good amount of time and commitment to it. And then I'm what I do is heavily based on mindfulness practice, but we integrate many different concepts around sport and performance, resilience, and linked back to practicing present moment awareness and paying attention in a particular way to our experience. So that's how I'm still operating. But we are with the expansion of what we're doing. The process will be getting involved with an initial assessment, which is a strength-based assessment that looks at 10 life skills, core competencies. It looks at mindset orientation. It looks at resiliency. It looks at our environmental influences, and then we figure out where you're at and have a better understanding of what your strengths are, and we work from there. And we say you are this. This is who you are. Let's work from there, and then. Unlike Strength Finder, which I'm sure you're aware of, our assessment we don't disregard areas of opportunity for improvement. So we start with I can, where my strengths are, and then we gradually work on those other areas of improvement where we can boost our potential even more. So that will be part of the new system. Where we develop that story, and then from there we have a variety of different experts and professionals that bring their own unique experience to this type of coaching. You mentioned Robert. He's someone that I look forward to working with on this platform. He'd be more. He can speak to many different things in terms of performance and mentoring in that way. But he also has a psychotherapy practice and background, which will be part of the system as well for more clinical designations. We'll have people that can address those needs as well. Because for me, I know the limits and the scope of my expertise. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a registered counselor. So I understand that. I understand where my limits are, and people like Robert, we have an ecosystem where I can refer people that need that clinical help.
I just want to I want to champion that so much, because I think in America's healthcare system, which we won't compare to Canada because that's a whole other podcast, we're hopefully we need some evolution down here, to say the least. And if you're not out there, sign up to vote yet in America, go vote. But it's a hodgepodge of things. We really have to take hold of responsibility for our own mental and physical health, and to have an advocate in the game, mental health or physical health, where your doctor, physician, coach, mentor can say, here's what I do and here's where I refer you to this. I think that's a responsibility that genuinely needs to be acknowledged, because so often in America, you'll go to the doctor, a general practitioner, and will be like, okay, well, here's what you do for your broken bone, what have you. But you kind of get very general diagnosis or diagnostic situations, whereas it really should be, okay, this is a mental health situation, let's send you to this professional. And then within that mental health, we've either got coaching, maybe it's neurofeedback you do, maybe it's EMDR, and you really got to know. And as a consumer or individual, you don't even know those things, so you have to put so much trust into who you're working with. And if the person you're working with isn't really a good person, or they're lazy, or it's about money, your health is really subject to risk. So we're at a point, this point as consumers, as humans, we need to figure out as much as we can and find the right team to be like, oh, I can really trust Kris. I don't know about EMDR, but he knows Robert and he said to go here. So you really need these good people in your mix. So I really want to applaud that you can respectfully know your space and then build out your team accordingly, so you can, not only build a business, but help the people you're helping as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, and that's, a big thing for me when I started. Um, you know, I purposely, in my communication, I purposely would do my best to stay away from mental health, um, because I know my limits, and
Sure.
so for me, I view my role as a proactive skill development, um, and something that again, I talked about my struggles, but the biggest thing that I want people to know is that you don't have to be struggling to benefit from developing these skills, and and then understanding. I agree. I get very frustrated. There's a lot of people that talk about mental health and offer advice and talk about mental health professionals in a way that if you had a physician managing someone with cancer, you would not talk about them in any negative way. I mean, I heard something the other day on a very popular hockey podcast where one of the guys said, basically said you have to be somewhat of a narcissist to be a psychiatrist. And I was just like, he's like, you think you can fix other people's problems and can't even fix your own. And I'm just like, that is not a really good message.
Was it an
These
older
people,
person? Do you know by chance?
no, it was a young
Oh,
person. It was, again,
wow. Okay.
hockey is that macho, and then the stigma, it just pumped into the stigma of mental
Sure.
health um, and these people are the psychiatrists that I know and work with are compassionate. They're highly trained. They help millions of people. And but there's just there's something about mental health and the mind that people feel like they can freely have this opinion about, and um, they can be unqualified to give advice on depression and other brain diseases like that. And so I agree, and I am very, very aware of my limits, and when I'm talking about these things, I'm very, from the start, I wanted to make sure that this was about a proactive skill development, and rather than managing mental health, which I consider clinical designations. For me, that's what mental health means. Brain health. These are, when we have a mental health issue, this is a brain disease, and again, that intangible nature of it it's hard for people to understand. But I can tell you, if you've experienced bipolar disorder, it is absolutely crippling, and it's painful, but it's hard to see. So I worked with a psychiatrist on a chronic brain disease program for University of British Columbia, and we have people there with Parkinson's, Huntington's, mood disorders, depression, and you look at Parkinson's patients or Huntington's disease, and it's a brain disease, and you can see you can see in their movements. So people say, yes, they're suffering, but with in the same sentence, bipolar, it's really hard to see, especially in my case when it's a lower degree of bipolar disorder. So it really is hard for people to relate to, and I think that's a big issue with people making comments like that fellow that just kind of pump into the stigma. So yeah.
Well, it's just, I mean, unfortunately, it really is just such new conversation. You see the NFL and the brain injuries and players dying, and and it's just now happening. And it really is unfortunate that we're this late in the game, particularly on sports and concussions and the damage that happened there. Then you get into like what you were just saying, Parkinson's, and if you've ever experienced a family member with Alzheimer's or any of these things, to really watch them lose who they really are, and or PTSD. I have a brother in the military that came home, and if you have a severed arm or something and you're a veteran, you can see it, you can deal with it. PTSD in the brain, you can't. And again, so much of our society labels mental anything around weakness, where I've had this incredible opportunity to do some of these modalities and technologies and see improvements in myself, and it's a complete luxury, let alone if your insurance covers it, you have time to do it. But it really shouldn't even be a luxury anymore. It should be something that we need to address. And it's being talked about more. I don't know if you follow Kanye West at all, but he's being very public, I don't know intentionally or not, about his bipolar disorder. And it's really erupting right now. And I would never wish this upon any human, regardless of how anyone feels about Kanye. But I will say one upside, if we can pull anything from it, is it's stimulating conversation. Maybe young people at home or parents are saying, oh my God, that's what I have, or this is how bad it is, or this is why we need to address this and put funding into our VA and mental health and get away from pharmaceuticals and all these business strategic partnerships. It's exposing how the mental, athlete, I think is more important than the physical. If you don't have your brain and you don't understand what's going on within you, you really can't train the physical or be happy, more importantly, without that piece. So it sucks that this is, number 2 question to number 1 physical. Like, it should be the complete opposite.
Yeah, and that's, I think I can applaud Kanye West. I definitely think that again, I watched another podcast on YouTube the other day where they were talking about Kanye West, and they were essentially laughing at his bipolar disorder, and essentially, saying that just the way they're talking about it, whatever you can say whatever you want about Kanye West, but he is managing something that is crippling, and it is a significant brain disease that people, it's hard for people to understand or relate to, because it's they don't know how it feels, and they may not have been around anyone that has experienced it. But I can tell you right now that it's not only affects that person, but it affects the family in a big way as well. So, and again, there's varying degrees of bipolar disorder. Like I don't know his situation, but it looks most likely he has a severe case, a severe degree. For me, it's quite manageable with medication, mindfulness. The manic states that I would experience weren't really out of control. They're I definitely experienced them, but I didn't end up doing some severe erratic behavior. My type of bipolar is mainly crippling anxiety and depression. But again, I'm probably 10 years into managing it, and I've found what works in terms of developing and maintaining a productive, happy life. But it's taken some trial and error for sure. So yeah, point being is that there are people out there doing some speaking about it, and but it is still a lot of conversation that is not serving it well, and feeding the stigma 100%.
Totally. Well, that's quite literally why Turmeric and Tequila is here. It's the balance of all things. The show's really not about either thing. Obviously, turmeric is an anti-inflammatory, and tequila is an excellent libation. But you got to balance it. You can't be too pressed around one side or the other, especially as athletes. I always think more is more, train is more, rest less. And then when you hit the wall, and if you can pull back, and like you said, 10 years, I've taken many years. If any of these conversations streamline anyone else's process, that's what this whole podcast is about. And I think there's such valuable intel with the in-between. We might not, you're obviously medically and certified and qualified on several levels. I'm not on the medical end by any means, but if even this conversation can spark someone digging further into their journey, that's what it's all about. I want to be mindful of your time. Speaking of, can you just give us a quick rundown of maybe like what your day looks like? Do you wake up, like meditate, and then give me a little idea of how you maintain on this mindfulness piece just in your day to day?
Well, now it's my time in formal practice is definitely less than what it used to be. And that's due to I have a 2-year-old, and so I don't have time to sit for 40 minutes twice a day like I used to. So I definitely I try to get in a formal practice, multiple times a day, short moments, and then throughout activity all day, ensuring that I am aware of where I am, paying attention and being present with where I am. When I'm in conversations with people, ensuring that I am present with those people, and doing so through practices that I work on. But yeah, finding moments throughout the activity, and those brief moments to get in formal practice. And that's the thing, with everyone, there's going to be a unique path, finding that frequency and regularity that works for them. People are very busy, and we're not trying to be monks with this practice. A term called householder mindfulness or meditation is what I like to use. Like, we know we have other things to do, so you can start with 5 minutes a day, and that will be a great place to start. I have a colleague that looked at brain imaging, recent research out of UCLA, and she contributed to that. And it showed in Alzheimer's and dementia patients that 20 minutes a day for 30 days in a row of simply breath awareness, counting the breath, led to physical changes in the prefrontal cortex in relation to attention control, decision making, also some physical changes in the hippocampus and the memory center of the brain. So definitely regularity with the practice, regularity with informal practice during activity is what I try to commit to these days, with again, building and overseeing this company. Plus, I started another one during COVID, so there's two companies rolling along, a 2-year-old, and I try to get it in there as often as I can, but definitely not as much as I used to when I had the time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, real life is still a thing, but I think that's when you have a good foundation of that skill set. You can perhaps do a little bit less, when duty calls, and kind of rely on that foundation to kind of get you through, and then, wait till you have some more time, which might be in 18 years, but.
Exactly. So.
I love it. Well, I mean, I encourage anyone, any athlete, any parent of athletes, or anyone that's just maybe even a misdiagnosis, something that's questioning a better way. I really encourage them to seek Kris out, seek out what you're doing, check out a guy like Robert, dig into some of these different modalities that we talked about. I'll list some of those books that you mentioned. Is there an app that you use? Like, I use, I can completely drawing, but that just goes to show you how much I do, but it's a meditation app, not Calm. It's the headset, Headspace.
Headspace. Yeah.
Do you recommend any of those?
I haven't used many apps.
Okay.
I used Insight Timer as a timer, but yeah, Headspace seems to be quite effective. Calm. Insight Timer is I believe there's some free guided meditations on there. Plus, there's some paid stuff. So those work quite nicely. And if you're really ambitious, sitting down by yourself and setting a timer and counting your breaths is a very valid form of practice. 1 to 10, back to 1, and sit for 5 minutes, and a very valid form of practice.
Okay, challenge accepted. When I post this, I'll put the challenge out there, and we'll see how many people can do it for even 5 minutes, which doesn't sound like a long time, but that's a long time. If you're meditating, doing sprints, or doing back squats, 5 minutes is a world. I love it. So give me really quick, and I'll let you go. Where do we find you? Hit me with hashtag handles for Instagram, website, anywhere, any details.
Yeah, amindtraining.com is a site right now. We'll be launching a new site very shortly here. It'll be a slight rebrand as well. But for the time being, amindtraining.com. Instagram is aim.mind.training. Facebook is amindtraining. YouTube, amindtraining. So that's pretty much amindtraining. You'll find me. Yeah.
Well, you nailed it on the branding. You got a gold star from me on that. But I'm pumped about what you do. I'm really excited to see. You said it's 4 years old. I can't wait to see how this is even in a couple years because of situations like Kanye, God bless him, and his family. But, where it's a little more in the spotlight. I'm really excited to see how our young humans are grasping on to this, living a better way and approaching mental health the same way they would their physical health and, going to train on the field and then they train off the field with conversations or mindfulness, meditation, EMDR, what have you. I think it's a really powerful space. And I will even say this, as cliche as it sounds, the more we can get a grip on ourselves and our own happiness, I fully believe as a community, as a human race, we can move towards a positive evolution and perhaps a little more peace in our world. So I'm here for the self-evolution.
100%, Kristen. Thank you for having me. And I'd love to come back anytime.
Yeah, we'll check back in. If anything's helpful from our end down here in America, from Turmeric and Tequila, let me know. I keep in touch with I coached for 10 years after college. And like I said, competed across it. So I still have my hand in the athletic arena a bit. And I've sent some people to Robert. If I have some fitting individuals, I'll send them your way. But I'm super excited to see how this grows and how this conversation opens up some major doors over the next few years.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. We'll keep in touch. Best of luck with the family, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Tune in next time, and don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.